Welcome to another exciting episode of Africa Updates, reaching you from Trust TV studios here in Abuja, Nigeria's capital. And this week on the program, we've been looking at something very important. It's been taking place for at least 3 to 4 years now on the African continent. Please do stay with us. We'll be right back. Welcome back to the program Africa Update, and I'm your host, Chiamaka Nwafor. Now, this week on the program, as I said earlier, we're looking at something quite very important and affects the African continent. Across parts of Africa, a troubling trend is emerging, growing support among the youth for military rulers. Unlike older generations who recall the instability of past coups, many young people today are disillusioned with democracy. From Mali to Niger, frustration over corruption, unemployment, public services, and insecurity has led many to lose faith in elected governments. Raised on democratic ideals but faced with unfulfilled promises, this generation is now turning away from the ballot and applauding the boot. Now, joining me on the program today to further discuss this situation is Dr. Samson Simon, a Public Affairs Analyst. Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us on Africa Update today.
Good afternoon. Thank you for having me.
If you can hear us, Dr. Samson, thank you for joining us on the program. Now, you've seen what's happening on the continent. You've seen what's taking place. Could you tell us exactly your thoughts on it? Because we see videos of youths jubilating over a coup in Niger, in Mali, in Burkina Faso. What does this mean? What could we say this ascribes to exactly?
Well, we have been clamoring for democratic governance on the African continent for a while, and thankfully most of us became democracies. Most of the countries on the continent became democracies. Sadly, the promised dividends of democracy have failed to come. People are not seeing any dividends. People have become disillusioned with what we do, and we're trying to pass it off as democracy. Because if you look at the elections, they are questionable. The people are not convinced that their wishes have been reflected across the continent. If you look at unemployment, it's getting worse. If you look at poverty, a lot of people are disenchanted with democracy, and they see the political class, they are enjoying themselves at the detriment of the general population. So they are directing their anger, and any alternative to them is better. And the reason why these military dictatorships are popular is because they are promising to do things differently. Sadly, I think we tend to forget history, because these people have been promising, the military has been promising to do things differently. And sadly, they have failed at delivering whatever dividends that they thought they could deliver. So particularly the young, they are not happy with the way Africa is headed, and these military dictators, particularly the one in Burkina Faso, seems to have, this particular one in Burkina Faso seems to have mastered the art of propaganda, because anything he says tends to resonate with the African population, particularly the young people, and not just African, even Black people across the world tend to like this particular one. They describe him in mythical proportions, as if he's one impeccable and faultless leader that would definitely deliver. Sadly, it's more of hype than reality. It's more propaganda. I think Hitler's minister of propaganda, Joseph Goebbels, would be proud of what they're doing, because they have seemed to have mastered this particular art of propaganda. And even educated people are falling for it. They are convinced that Buhari, in particular in Burkina Faso, is a hero, is doing extremely good things in Burkina Faso. But we know the realities are different. There's nothing exceptional that he's doing that any other democratic leader has not done on the African continent. So there's nothing special about what they're doing.
Okay, so I can see from your response your take on the government or the junta leader in Burkina Faso, that's Ibrahim Traore, the supposed man of the hour for the African continent, especially after that assassination attack on him sometime last month. Apparently, you do not agree with this rhetorics about him. Why is that?
It's just merely propaganda. If you try to verify most of the things, like the songs that people brandish, either by Kelly or Rihanna or Beyonce, they're all deep fakes. In fact, many of them are being created in Nigeria. There's this particular guy, they call him the Kenneth in Nigeria. He doesn't even deny the fact that he's a deep fake. He's just a fan of Tuareg. So people like the guy for no apparent reason, because there's nothing special. Maybe the rhetoric, he's saying what resonates with them. He's talking about anti-Western, he's pouring out anti-Western sentiments. He feels the West is the enemy. It has failed to develop. Africa has had a relationship with the West, and there's nothing to show for it. But by the way, it's not like any other country or any other continent outside Africa is supposed to come and develop Africa. The development of Africa is the responsibility of Africans, not anybody else. And by expelling the French, for example, and bringing in the Russians, and even claiming to pursue relationship with Venezuelans and Cubans, because Tuareg is basically a Marxist, there's no guarantee that you have the results he desires, or the Africans that support him desire. We know that the reason why they even removed the democratically elected leader in Burkina Faso was because of the fundamentalists in Burkina Faso. And sadly, despite changing, even the last dictator that was toppled for Tuareg to come on board, things have really gotten worse on his watch. So the result they tried for even toppling a democratically elected government was because these jihadis are trying to take over Burkina Faso. They control more than 50% of the country, and they have caused humanitarian crisis, and things are really bad. So you have failed to even achieve that, even as a strong man, that you don't have to follow through the democratic process to get what you desire. You have failed woefully at that. So I don't see why such a person should be celebrated outside the rhetoric, outside the propaganda, that people are carried away that Ibrahim Traore is some sort of idol that should be worshipped by the African people or black people across the world. There's no justification. There's no reality to that.
Okay. All right, let's come back to the conversation, although he somehow has something to do with it. But again, youth people are quite eager to actually, some even ask for the military to take over the country and, say we don't want democracy anymore. Now, is this a thing out of desperation because, we think we're tired, we'd rather have these guys be in position, or is it something we can see? Does it have a viable long-term solution? Because there again, there is the associations, the UN and all these other groups who over time will have to tell you, you can't be part of us anymore because you are not a democratically elected government. So how does this help these countries and the youth in those countries as well?
The truth is, the average African is disappointed in democracy. He's so disillusioned that he feels that any form of government is better than a democracy. And the reasons are overwhelming. The economic hardship, there's so much misery. So people are just frustrated. And what they fail to understand is you should not just clamor for change. You should clamor for something better. I know we have, like in Nigeria in particular, people wanted something different. Sadly, they couldn't get it during the last elections. And even across the continent, people don't seem to get their heart desires. But asking for something that is worse than what you even have now, I don't think that really makes sense. No matter how much the rhetoric you hear that resonates with what you think is the best thing, this anti-Western sentiment. By the way, I think we have to take full responsibility for ourselves on the continent. Blaming the West, blaming colonial masters, imperialism is just kicking the can down the road. It's just chasing shadows. We have to take full responsibility for ourselves, whether we have good relationship like Burkina Faso, whether it's the relationship with the French or with the Russians or with the North Koreans or with the Cubans. It doesn't matter whom they have a relationship with. The success or the failure of Burkina Faso squarely lies on the shoulders of the leaders and the people of Burkina Faso. I think that's one thing we Africans fail to understand. We think somebody sabotaging us. The truth is, there's no country on earth the other countries that don't have interest in, and they are trying to do everything to maximize their interest there. But you don't allow it. You to pursue your own interests, and you don't allow another country to come and undermine you because that country is pursuing its interests. But it's not something that can stop, no matter whom you have a relationship with. Even the Russians now that they have a relationship with, of course, the Russians are also very practical people. There is something that they feel they are going to get there. So they're not just doing that for charity. So we have to tell ourselves the truth. We are not happy with the way we practice our democracy. Democracy on the African continent seems to have failed, and not only failed, it has failed woefully. But we should not clamor for something that is even far worse than a democracy. If there's a way we can forge our democracy, make it better, we should not relent. I know some of us, like in Nigeria, many of us were disappointed with what happened in the last elections because they were expecting things to be different. So we should not relent. If we keep at it and we keep doing the right thing, I think eventually we are going to prevail. But the moment we give up entirely on having good governance, on saying anything should go, any tyrant should come and rule us, anybody that tramples on our rights is our hero, I think that becomes something else. And I'm afraid that we are beginning to lose dignity for ourselves for even clamoring for a dictator to come and take over. Somebody that does things at his whim and his caprice, somebody that doesn't really care about your opinion, is what he wants, that he pursues. Somebody that tramples on your right, is that what you want? Instead of, no matter how bad the democracy, like Winston Churchill will say, democracy is the worst form of government except for other forms of government. So nobody is saying democracy is a perfect form of government. It has many shortcomings, and more especially the variant that we practice on the African continent looks more of a dictatorship, looks like the tyranny of some privileged few. Still, we can make it better instead of clamoring for something that we know is completely out of our hands and is going to prove our undoing eventually.
Okay, so some of the issues that would actually, this sentiment amongst youths, what could we say some of these issues are? I know that, we could say youth unemployability is there, and insecurity, corruption, per service delivery. These issues, these socioeconomic issues, how are they affecting and growing this sentiment? And what can really be done, to roll back this seeming wave across, especially West and Central Africa?
Well, I think the democratically elected leaders on the continent must be shaken in their boots now by the popularity of the Tuareg in Burkina Faso, because the cult, I think, is Council on Foreign Relations that did an article. They called it the cult of Tuareg. Tuareg has overwhelming support. Even, it's not just limited. I know young people are at the forefront of the support, but even to older people, I never thought the devotion to Tuareg was deep and widespread until I started interacting with people about it. So I think the only way other leaders can prove that they're better is they have to deliver on the things that have eluded the African. What are these things? Not only economic benefits, but even human rights, right? Ensuring that things are done the right way, ensuring transparency, ensuring rule of law, ensuring that the dividends of democracy actually trickle down, ensuring that they carry everybody along, and they have to deliver. They have to be very competent. As a democratically elected leader, you cannot afford to be sloppy. You cannot afford to be considered to be incompetent. So that's the only way you can convince the African that you are better than a Tuareg, because people are just so much in love with this particular young man. And I think it's basically the propaganda. Propaganda is not the reality, but people are convinced that he's some sort of hero that is coming in shining armor to rescue the continent from all these corrupt and bad leaders. So these leaders have to prove that they are better. And how can they prove that they are better? They should deliver tangible results that will be overwhelming, that beyond the shadow of a doubt, that people will be convinced, yes, the democracy is better. Because if they don't do that, then more of Tuaregs will be coming up all over the continent, and the love and the devotion of the people will be given to them fully, and the support will be all over.
Okay, now let's go back. Earlier you said something about the West not. We as a people are the ones to help ourselves, but it takes two hands to wash your hand clean. Now, our international actors, what's their role in all this? What are we expecting from them to see that somehow democracy stays, in as much as we don't want their undue influence in running our countries or running the continent, but it takes neighborliness to make things work. What are we expecting from the West or the East, as the case may be?
Well, for you to succeed, you need as many friends as possible. The most powerful countries on earth, whether it's the United States or China, are all there looking for friends and trying to win over friends. So everybody needs friends, strong allies to succeed. And you don't select your friends. If a relationship with a particular nation is in your best interest, do everything possible to be friends with such a country, if it's in your best interest to do that. And Burkina Faso needs France, just like France needs Burkina Faso. I know the French president, particularly the current one, might have overstepped his bounds. I remember talking about the lack of gratitude from the Africans. So that was very arrogant. I think he went too far. And because there was so much anti-French sentiment, making such statements did not help the cause of the French. So as much as you were the colonial power once, that doesn't make you a superior country. I think they need to respect any country that is trying to relate with any African country, must understand that they're equal now. The African country is not inferior. You treat the African country as an equal. There should be mutual respect. There should be mutual benefits. What is a particular country, like let's say Burkina Faso now, France, it should be obvious to the Burkina people that they're actually getting something out of the relationship as much as to the French people, because that's the only way. If the people in Burkina Faso are convinced that France is not doing anything rather than exploiting them, then that relationship will never work, no matter how much Burkina Faso might be benefiting from it. And the French too will lose that important relationship. So I think for two countries that are involved, it's important for the benefits to be clearly spelled out, and they should be mutual. No country should be seen to be exploited particularly by its population, because the anti-sentiment to any particular, to the partner, the sentiment to be, negative sentiment to be too strong for the partner if the citizens of a particular country are convinced that they are being cheated, they are being exploited. So you need partners as a country, you need allies, you need everybody to succeed. But mind you, the honors still rest with you. If your country succeeds, it's you. If your country fails, it's you. It's not about imperialism, it's not about colonialism, it's not about slavery. The truth is, we as Africans were solely responsible for our success or for our failure. And we need to understand that imperialists will always come and push their interests, whether on the African continent or even on other continents around the world. They will always be there. Other countries always push for their interests. So what we need to understand is also to push for our own interests while these other countries push for their own. And they don't owe us anything like we don't owe them anything. So what really matters is push your interests while other people push for their own. And eventually, if everybody benefits, that means it's a win-win situation.
All right. So now, what can we do as an African democracies in this country? What can we do to get our young citizens, our youth, to, see democracy differently again, to believe in it again, and think that this is actually the right way to go, to not clamor for a takeover, a military takeover in the country? What can we do, especially for the countries that don't, that have not gone through that process yet? What can be done?
Well, I think for a country like ours in Nigeria, we need to organize elections that are credible. I'm not saying that our elections are not credible, but the reality is the perception that people have is that the elections are not credible. So you have to convince people beyond the shadow of a doubt, right, that the elections are credible. And if the elections are credible and any winner that emerges, the opponents are convinced that has emerged in a very free and fair contest, then people will not question such emergence. And people will be okay with it, even if they don't like it. But if the process is questionable, you claim glitches, you see malpractice everywhere, you see questionable things everywhere, then you're eroding the trust of the people in you. People will not trust those institutions. And when people don't trust those institutions, they will look for any alternative outside such institutions. Another thing is that you have to be seen to deliver on the dividends that you claim democracy actually offers. Not just the rhetoric now, not just the hype, not you claiming something, not on paper. In reality, people should see their lives actually getting better. Can we in all honesty say that democracy has delivered for Nigerians? Are we better off now than we were under, let's say, Abacha, or under Abdusalami Abubakar? If in all honesty we say we are better off, then that means democracy has actually yielded results. If the opposite is the case, that means democracy will have legitimacy issues. People will question democracy, and it will just be a matter of time before people, even within Nigeria, start clamoring for any alternative, any available alternative to democracy. So if I were part of Nigerian leadership, I will ensure that I deliver, I give people their heart desires. People should see tangible benefits because democracy is in Nigeria, and they should be convinced beyond the shadow of a doubt that it's better than a dictator or a military person taking over.
All right, thank you. Not just democracy to Nigeria, but to the African continent. Very good elections and seeing the dividends of democracy in all the countries, the eastern, the western, the central, the northern, and the southern part of our great country, Africa. Thank you so much, Dr. Samson Simon, for joining us today on Africa Update, sharing your insights on the situation of youths clamoring for military rule on the continent.
Thank you for having me.
We'll be talking about the way youths seem to be clamoring, seem to be very excited when they said there's a coup in the country. And Dr. Simon has been talking to us about that, giving us his insights on the matter. We're going to short break, and when we return, we'll give you stories of what's happening on the continent. Just stay with us. Welcome back. Thank you for staying with us here on Africa Update. Let's go over to Gabon, where we see that former President Ali Bongo and family go into exile in Angola. Here's more from Africa News.
He had spent 19 months locked up in his home in Libreville. Now, 5 days after his wife and son were released from prison, Gabon's former president Ali Bongo and his family have arrived in Angola. The Bongo dynasty had ruled Gabon for over 50 years before being ousted from power in a coup by Brice Clotaire Oligui Nguema in 2023. The Bongo's departure into exile was facilitated by Angolan President João Lourenço, according to the Angolan presidency. Lourenço came to Libreville on Monday in order to improve relations with Oligui Nguema, who was declared the winner of a presidential election last month. The African Union, which is currently headed by Angolan President João Lourenço, had repeatedly asked Gabon's new authorities to release Bongo and his family.
Well, that's it for this week on Africa Update. I hope you've been informed and educated about what you can do and what we can do as a continent to help us divert away from this military rule situation taking place in some parts of our continent. I hope that leaders, will take into effect what has been said. Good democracies, good elections, dividends of democracy is what our guest today said on the program, is what the people, the youths will need, to not have to clamor for military rule in their countries. It's been a good time with you on the program today. I'm your host, Chiamaka Nwafor. Same time, same place next week. Bye for now.